What's going on, everybody? This is Steve from Bloom Audio. And if you've been following hi-fi news, you've probably noticed just a steady increase in the number of IEMs coming out and just the number of great options out there. So today we're going to talk about finding the right IEM for you in this massive sea of different options. We're going to look at a couple different things, from the complex relationship between price, tuning, technical capabilities, and listener preference, the technical aspects of the IEM, the engineering that goes into it, drivers, and all of that stuff, and kind of see how that all connects to help you find what you're looking for. So let's go ahead and take a closer look. So probably the first thing to address is this really complex relationship between price, performance, and preference when it comes to IEMs. Whether you're new to the hobby or you've been doing this for years, you've probably had the experience where you listen to one IEM and you think, wow, this sounds great, and it's only $50. And then you listen to another one and you're like, I kind of hate how this sounds. And then you look at the price tag and it's $1,500. And you're kind of like, well, why is something that's so much cheaper so much better than this other thing? Now, there are cases where there have been some simply poorly designed, poorly tuned, high-end products that really just don't sound good. And it happens. But more often, it's a matter of preference over performance. So when we look at IEMs, we can see a lot that are tuned more in a reference direction. The goal of the IEM here is to reproduce sound that is as neutral and true to the original as possible. Typically, you're looking at something like a diffuse field style tuning that looks very flat and linear with just that bump for the upper mids and treble, which is basically designed to counterbalance the fact that with an IEM, your outer ear doesn't have anything to say about the sound. These various ridges and curves and bumps on our outer ear are designed to enhance that upper end of the frequency spectrum where things like speech happen. So when you stick something straight in your ear, you don't have that physical part of your ear enhancing that. And so it needs to be increased in order for it to sound right, to sound neutral. So with a reference style IEM, typically that's all you get is a pretty flat linear curve and that little bump. I guess not a linear curve, just a line. Probably what's really the most popular tuning style though isn't that total clean reference sound. It's more of a balanced sound. Something like the sort of famous Harman curve, where you have some enhancement to the bass, some enhancement to the mids and treble that again go along with compensating for your ear. And so you get a little bit of everything because most genres, especially popular genres from jazz, pop, rock, all of that, do tend to play best with a little bit of extra bass. And then on the other side of that, you have more of a fun tuning style. You're not enhancing things based on scientific research or whatever else. You're kind of saying, hey, wouldn't it be fun if we just added an extra 10 dB bass boost at the bottom of this? Yeah, hey, that sounds great. Let's do it. And so you end up with the, Fat Freak HBB Deuce or something like that, where it's just fun. It's a little bit exaggerated. It's not natural. It's not balanced, but people love it anyway. And so when you're actually listening to music and not just looking at charts and graphs on the internet, there is going to be a lot of difference in the preference there, right? If you're listening to hip hop on a $3,000 IEM that's based on the diffuse field target, it's not going to sound that great. You might be able to appreciate, wow, this sounds like a nice big space and there's very clear separation, but also it sounds like there's no bass, and I just don't like listening to my music with no bass. On the flip side, if you love classical music and you primarily listen to orchestral recordings and you're listening to something that's like massively bass boosted and overwarm, it's not going to sound good. It's going to sound muddy. You're not going to have the clarity and the separation that you're listening for in a classical piece. So, the Empire Ears Triton just isn't going to be a good pick for you. And you might do better with something that's a third of the price or less, like Kiwi Ears Orchestra Light, which is going to be much more balanced at a fraction of the price and sound better for what you're looking for. And then along with those sort of core tuning factors, is this reference based on accuracy? Is this more of a balanced sound that's going to sound good with a wide variety of music and be more of a crowd pleaser? Or is this something that's a little bit more fun and exaggerated? You can also be listening for how it presents the soundstage, that overall sense of space. Does it feel like all the music is happening right here, right around my head and my eyes and at my ears? Does it sound like there's more of a three-dimensional space here? The singer doesn't feel like he's in my head. The singer feels like he's out here in front of me or on a stage 50 feet away. Or how does that sound and what do I like? Do I like that singer up close, or maybe I don't really care to feel vocals like that? I want the bass or whatever else. The second part of that is the imaging. And that's more about the specific placement and the separation of those elements. If you listen to a lot of classic rock, is really an easy one to go with. So, listening to the Beatles, you might find that Paul, George, and John are kind of in their own place on the stage. And an IEM with good imaging is going to give you that sense of not just the placement on the stage, but the depth, where they're standing, and often connect them to the instrument they're playing. Is it Paul on the bass? Does that feel like Paul's vocals match up with where you're hearing the bass guitar coming from? Or George on the guitar, or whatever it is. The imaging puts all those pieces together, and in the best case, you feel like you could close your eyes and just imagine the stage in front of you. So that obviously combines with the sound stage to give you that overall sense of space. And you could really say the sound stage is a component of the imaging overall. And then the third piece of that is the level of detail being presented. Is the bass just kind of washed out tones that are in this general vicinity? Or is there a clarity to the texture, the strings, the feeling of the pluck and all of that? Same with a piano. Do you get the sense of, wow, there are hammers hitting strings as the pianist presses down? Or does it just kind of sound like tones that are out there? And the greater the sense of detail, I might say resolution as well, the more you feel like these are real instruments. So when you put those all together, imaging, the sound stage, the detail, and then combine that with the tuning, the goal should be that you have just an incredible experience of your music. Now, to accomplish that sonic experience, IEMs use a lot of different techniques, probably more than are used with traditional headphones, which for the most part you have dynamic drivers, planar magnetic drivers, open back and close back being the variables with a traditional over-ear headphones. With IEMs, you've got about 5 different driver types. They're all closed back, but you get an almost infinite combination, different numbers and types of drivers that go into that. So, you have dynamic drivers, planar magnetic drivers, balanced armature drivers, bone conduction drivers, and electrostatic drivers being the main ones there. Typically dynamic drivers, they're going to give you the most sense of punch and impact, while also providing what just feels like a natural timbre and a natural delivery to the sound. Typically, they can be used for full range or are often used for just the bass and occasionally used for the mid-range as well. Balanced armatures are much smaller than dynamic drivers typically, and they can also be used for the full range, but they're more typically broken up to handle specific parts of the frequency spectrum, with different balanced armature designs being used in different positions. Planar magnetic drivers sometimes feel like almost a combination of dynamic and balanced armatures in the way they sound, where balanced armatures have very fast, nimble delivery. Planar are similar, but they have some of that slam and impact you can get from a dynamic driver. Electrostatic drivers are primarily used for the treble. Now, to be clear, the electrostatic drivers used in IEMs are not the same tech as like a Stax electrostatic headphone or something like that, but there is some similar characteristic there in terms of that very fast, clean, crisp delivery of treble. And then, of course, you have bone conduction, which typically bone conduction is used to basically create resonance and vibration for the very lowest of frequencies, but it's sometimes also used in like a full range setting to just enhance that sense of space, as the ability of bone conduction drivers to literally vibrate your ear can create some sensations that go outside of what typical drivers provide. So within all those driver types, you're going to have different configurations. Some IEMs are single driver. So a single dynamic driver could be something more inexpensive, like a Moondrop Aria, or it could be something up in the $3,000 range, like a Dita Perpetua. With a single driver IEM, you're typically dealing with dynamic, planar, or balanced armature, though typically not balanced armature that often. The advantage here is, the simplicity. Typically get a greater sense of cohesion and coherence in the sound, and with dynamic drivers in particular, a very natural timbre and delivery. With multi-driver IEMs, you have two sides of it. On the one hand, you can get things like most of 64 Audio's IEM, or the Audio Valhalla, Visioneer's Phoenix, where you have a whole bunch of the same type of driver. So the U12T has 12 balanced armature drivers, or the Valhalla has 19 balanced armature drivers. You're dividing those drivers up with a crossover. These are the bass drivers, these are the mid-range drivers, these are the treble drivers. Or you might have something like a hybrid, tri-brid, or quad-brid. You have multiple driver types within a single IEM. So with a hybrid, you might think of something like a Campfire Solaris, or a Fat Freak Maestro Mini or Scarlett Mini, where you're trying to combine those benefits of a dynamic driver, the natural quality, the impactful bass, with some of that speed and technical delivery that comes from a balanced armature driver. Now, a tri-brid like the Empire Ears Odin or the Moondrop Variations takes that to the next level by adding typically an electrostatic driver, or some number of electrostatic drivers, that's going to give you that extra speed and crispness in the treble, and again improve on those technical qualities while maintaining that core sense of natural sound and that powerful bass you typically get from a dynamic driver. Now, for the most part, quad-brids exist because people wanted to take a tri-brid design and add more bass, because the answer is almost always, for whatever reason, more bass. So you stick the bone conduction driver in there for the low end, and that creates, again, this ability to transmit deeper sub bass, possibly deeper than you could actually hear, because it's felt more than heard at that range, along with the rest of that signal. So something like the Empire Ears Raven or the Audio Origin even are quad brids, using that full range of drivers to really capture a full range of sound. So when you put this all together, you got a few questions to ask while you're shopping for an IEM to really find the right one. First question is, what kind of music do you listen to the most? There are a lot of IEMs that are going to be good with a broad range of music, but you might want to lean into something that's going to do the best job with what you like the most. If you listen to classical music, again, you're going to be leaning more towards reference tuning, maybe somewhere between balanced and reference. Then after you look at the basics of the tuning, you might want to think about what kind of driver complement this is going to have. Maybe you're into classical, but you're more so into sort of film scores, modern soundtracks, and other things that have actually really different requirements from a sound perspective than traditional classical music. If you're listening to a Hans Zimmer film score, especially the modern stuff, Inception or Dune, you need that sub bass. So possibly looking into something with a bone conduction driver might be your best bet. In that case, though, you probably want something more on the order of Icelab Spectrumica, which has the bone conduction driver, but doesn't have really strongly enhanced sub bass and bass in general. On the other hand, maybe you primarily listen to rock, classic rock, alternative, metal, all of those sorts of genres. You're probably going to want something that's a little bit warmer sounding, that has that big punch in the bass. Maybe not so worried about that ultra low sub bass, just because that's not generally used as much in rock music. You're probably going to be looking at a lot of single dynamic driver IEMs, or maybe some hybrids that give you a little bit more pop in the snare, maybe a little more presence in the vocals from those balanced armatures combined with a dynamic, because that's really going to capture the natural sense and the instruments that you're looking for best. However, if you lean more into modern music, electronica, EDM, a lot of hip hop, you probably want that sub bass, but you also want that strong bass emphasis. Most pop music nowadays is using a lot of the bass frequencies. You're going to want both the impact and the extension down, and that's when you're going to start looking at something with a little bit more low-end emphasis. For a hybrid, could be something like the Fat Freak, Scarlett Mini, or any other number of more bass boosted style IEMs. On the high end, maybe a quad brid like the Empire Ears Raven is going to give you that full range of low end plus that upper end performance, both in terms of vocals and all of the different layers of instruments and all of that. So kind of to summarize, I can't tell you what IEMs you're really going to love. And the best way to find it is obviously going to be to listen to a bunch of different ones and really figure it out. But taking a look, learning how to read the frequency response curves that a lot of brands, a lot of websites have out there. We have a pretty good library on our website currently, understanding the driver types and knowing which ones are going to be important for different genres, with dynamic and balanced armatures kind of being all around, electrostatic leaning more into the technical end of things, and bone conduction being there typically to really enhance those sub-bass regions. If you put that all together, you should be able to start building a pretty good idea of what is going to work for you and what is going to really enable you to get lost in the music. And that's what this is all about, is putting the headphones on, putting the IEMs in, turning on, maybe it's your favorite track, maybe it's a new album, and just being able to turn off everything else for a minute and enjoy the music. Thanks for watching. We've got a great selection of IEMs you can check out at bloomaudio.com. Be sure to like and subscribe, and we'll be back soon with more high fidelity audio content.